In my previous tutorial, I covered an overview of MySQL Workbench interface. In today's tutorial, we are going to explore different types of SQL commands, and I will provide the example for each. So let's get started. Welcome back, my name is Gurpreet, and if this is the first time you are visiting my channel, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you stay up to date with all of my videos. So let's get started with today's video, and in today's tutorial, we are going to learn SQL command types. And I will be focusing on the most used SQL commands that I have used in the last 2 decades of my career. SQL commands are divided into different groups depending on their purpose. So let's start with our first group, which is DDL, which means Data Definition Language. DDL, as the name suggests, it allows you to define your database and are used to create, modify, or delete database objects such as table, indexes, views. That's going to change the structure of your database. Underneath this group, you can find some common DDL commands like create, alter, drop. So let's look at all these commands. So create command, it helps you to create new objects in the database, like creating a new table with the specified columns and data types, or creating a new view or stored procedures, and so on. So let's look at this example. In this query, we are trying to create a table named user with 3 columns, that is ID, name, and email. The ID column is an integer and is set as the primary key of the table. So now let's look at alter command. So alter command helps to alter or modify an existing object like table by adding or dropping columns, changing data types, or renaming the table. So let's look at this example. In this query, we are trying to add a new column named age to the user table. The data type of the column is an integer. We will go in detail for all these command types. So this is just an overview of all these command types. So I'm going to show you one example at a time. So moving on to the next DDL command, which is drop. So drop command helps to delete or drops one or more object from the database, like deleting a table and all its data. So let's look at this example where we have said drop table user. This query deletes the user table from the database. Note that dropping a table will permanently delete all the data stored in it. So this query should be used with caution. These are the DDL commands that are used to define your database. Now let's move on to the second group type, that is DQL, that is Data Query Language. It is specifically designed for querying and retrieving data from relational databases. DQL allows users to retrieve, filter, and sort data stored in a database table. DQL command typically includes select statements, which are used to specify the column to retrieve and filter rows based on various criteria using the where clause. DQL also includes other commands such as join, group by, having, order by, and limit that can be used to perform more complex queries. So let's look at an example. In this example, the query is selecting the first name, last name, and email columns from the customer table, but only for customer who lived in New York, as specified in the where clause. The results are then stored by last name in ascending order, again as specified in the order by clause. This is just a basic example where DQL can be used to perform many different types of queries on a variety of tables depending upon specific need of the user. DQL is one of the most fundamental components of SQL and one of the most important command that is used extensively in many applications that you need to master in order to be good in SQL. Now let's move on to the third group type, which is DML. That means Data Manipulation Language. It is a type of SQL command used to manipulate data stored inside your relational database. Underneath this group, you can find some most commonly used DML commands like insert, update, and delete. So let's look at the insert command. The insert command is used to add new data to the table in the database. It specifies the table name and the value to be inserted. For example, this command inserts a new employee records into the employee table with the first name John and the last name Doe. Department is marketing and with the salary of 50,000 integer value. And the next command is update command. The update command, again, it is used to modify the existing data within the table. It specifies the table name, the column to be updated, and the new values. So for example, the below query, this is used to update the department column of the employee with employee ID of 101 to marketing. So that's how we can update and insert the values within the table. And the last command type is delete command type under data manipulation language. So the delete command is used to remove one or more rows from the table in the database. It specifies the table name and a condition that identify the rows to be deleted. For example, this command deletes the employee with employee ID of 101 from the employee table. Now let's move on to the fourth group type, that is DCL, which is Data Control Language. Data Control Language, it's a type of SQL command used to control access to the database. That is, it allows you to give access to specific user to your database or to tables or schema and so on. The two most commonly used DCL commands are grant and revoke. The grant command is used to give user or roles permission to access, object, or perform actions in the database. It specifies the type of permission, the user or role, and the object or the action to which access is granted. For example, this particular command grants the marketing role the permission to select and insert data on the employee table. The next command is revoke. The revoke command is used to remove permissions that have been previously granted to the user or role. It specifies the type of permission, the user or role, and the object or action from which the access is revoked. For example, this particular command revokes the permission granted to the marketing role to insert data on the employee table. Now let's move on to the last and the fifth group type, which is DCL. That means Transactional Control Language. DCL stands for Transactional Control Language, and it's a type of SQL command used to manage transactions in a database. Transactions are a set of SQL statements that are executed as a single unit of work, which must either succeed or fail as a whole. The three most commonly used DCL commands are commit, rollback, and save point. And here's the brief explanation of each of these commands. So let's look at the commit command. The commit command is used to permanently save changes made in the transaction to the database. It confirms that the transaction is complete and all the changes are applied. For example, this set of SQL statement begins a transaction, then execute one or more SQL statements, and then commits the transaction, saving any changes to the database. And the next command is rollback. This rollback command is used to undo any changes made in the transaction and return the database to its previous state. It is typically used when an error occurs during a transaction or when the transaction needs to be cancelled. For example, this set of SQL statements begins a transaction, executes one or more SQL statements, and then rollbacks the transaction, undergoing any changes made in the process. Now the third one is save point. The save point command is used to create a point within a transaction that can be used as reference for later rollback. It allows for partial rollback of the transaction rather than rolling back the entire transaction to its previous state. So for example, in this set of SQL statement, we begin a transaction, execute SQL statements, create a save point named SP1, execute additional SQL statements, roll back to the save point SP1, execute more SQL statements, and finally commits the transaction. These were the 5 different groups of SQL command types. Hope you all enjoyed this session, and if you are visiting my channel for the first time, then please make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you stay up to date with all of my tutorials. Also, in this video description you will find a link to the top books related to SQL. So check it out and see you in the next session.